humans have done superhuman things without enhancement for thousands of years.
This enhanced, technologically enhanced world that we live in is going to demand more and more of the human on a daily basis.
Next session is about a very interesting project called Enhanced Games, the race to superhumanity. And this is focused on creating a kind of alternate Olympics. Because Olympics, which is really peak human performance, there's a big controversy around it that almost 44% athletes take drugs, they enhance, because it is very difficult to be at that level of peak performance, and it takes a huge strain on the body, and to be able to do that without enhancement is difficult. And so a group of very cutting-edge scientists, backed by billionaires like Peter Thiel and Balaji Srinivasan, the founder is a man called Aaron D'Souza. They have created a project called Enhanced Games, where they're saying, let's see what the human body is capable of when it is enhanced and augmented and engineered in safe settings, but with no holds barred, audacious thinking. Let's see where humanity can get to. And as I said, it's only 2 seconds in the galactic time of the planet being here that we recognize ourselves as being humans in this shape and form. We just heard from David Reich about ancient humans, and now we're going to focus on what it's possible to metamorphose biologically. And a counterpoint to that is to find a kind of superhumanity and peak performance within the biological being that we already are. And what's fascinating now is that we're going to have 2 speakers who are both very close friends, who both have very different approaches to this idea of the biological being and expanding human mind and human performance and human body. Dan Turner, our first speaker, our speaker who was meant to come here, but he's not been able to because there's a pivotal shift happening in the world of enhanced games. This is Dan Turner, who's worked with the most ambitious people on the planet, many Olympic sports athletes, people in the elite forces, people in the corporate world, and he is being now attached to the Enhanced Games project to be the scientist for safety and a stable enhancement of peak human performance. So ladies and gentlemen, he's going to join us on Zoom because, as I said, he's had a last-minute shift and he can't join us. So Dan, if he's already on Zoom, do show him. And then, as I said, we also have with us a friend of Dan's, Pete Naschak, who is from the US Navy SEALs. So this is really a kind of exhibit A of human performance at its peak. He's been a master of a Navy SEALs unit, and now he runs performance activation, where again he works both with athletes, with elite forces, and with peak performance, whether it's corporates, whether it's neurosurgeons and others in high-intensity professions, to shape and expand human performance and psyche, but through a different method, which is more organic and through environment and a relationship with nature. They both have different philosophies. Much of it overlaps, and I want to share with you that today I'm kind of forcing them both into extreme positions so that we make this tension clear, but they really do overlap on a lot of things. Dan loves nature. Pete and he are very close friends, but today it's like a particle accelerator. I want both their extreme visions to be made apparent by them coming together on stage. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dan Turner and Pete Naschak. Dan, thank you for not coming and letting us down. Yes, be sorry. So Dan, I wanted to start with you. Do share with the audience, what is this vision of superhumanity? You know, and don't put any caveats, because like I said, I've set the framework. This is a particle accelerator conversation. Tell us, what is the idea of superhumanity and why scientists like you and many others, including George Church, are backing a project like this?
Absolutely. Hi, Shoma. Hi, Pete. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. And my sincere apologies, I can't be there in person, but I am ready to collide, as you say. Yeah, so the enhanced games were really setting out to integrate modern day medicine into sport, into elite level sport. We're setting out to showcase the full potential of the human body with the help of science. And we really want to rewrite the future of athletic and human achievement to create superhumans. You know, our vision is to find new ways, innovative techniques, inspired by sport, by public imagination, that really highlights this profound synergy between medicine, science, biotechnology, and the human, the aspiring, the ambitious human. And so we believe that when we create this this arena for humans to come together as they do in sport, and we offer them the safe ability to explore their own limitations and identify what it is that is preventing them from performing at the greatest level possible in a particular environment, such as a 50-meter freestyle or a long jump, that we can see profound improvements in individuals, but those individuals will inspire and influence many other individuals that will then lead to, as we've seen in the past, new world records and new scientific discoveries.
Right. So, Dan, before I draw Pete into the conversation, I just want you to lay this world out a little bit more. So, one, tell us in the short term, what are the kind of sciences, chemicals, engineering, prosthetics, what is it that's already happening? And then tell us where that could head to. You know, what's the outlier stuff that is being discussed in the labs of the world?
Yeah, so I mean, currently when people think about human enhancement within sport, we tend to think about steroids. We tend to think about anabolic agents such as testosterone, growth hormone, and then occasionally we think about things like beta blockers as well. So, you know, when we think about these two different groups of substances, steroids, anabolic agents tend to accelerate the protein synthesis. They tend to accelerate the ability of the muscle to grow quicker, to reach faster speeds. And then when we think about things like beta blockers, propranolol, these are things that tend to suppress the feedback loop that's created within the body to tell the body that it's experiencing pain or fear, for example, by reducing the heart rate. So that's where we're currently at. But I think as we progress into the future, where this could go is into all sorts of new discoveries of how repurposing of modern day drugs could be used to accelerate performance. And so we might be looking specifically at different challenges that humans might face. So for example, a surfer might require the ability to hold their breath for a longer period of time, or a triathlete or a cyclist might require more fearlessness. And so we're starting to uncover different techniques like a stellate ganglion block. This can be used as an injection of anesthesia that can be put in the back of the neck, and it stimulates and blocks the nerve impulse. And what that does is help suppress neural activity, which is the body telling the brain that essentially there is a fearful situation, a threatening situation happening. And then we could be looking at things like optogenetics, for example. This could be light-based manipulation of, they've done this in rodents. They look at light-based manipulation where they can take a group of rodents and they can help them forget scary events that they've experienced. And it's a potential that these types of techniques could then be used with humans in the future, consenting humans with the right medical supervision. So there really is, it's this integration between modern day medicine, the repurposing of current drugs, and how they might fit with the circumstances in which the athlete wants to perform.
Right, Dan. That's a good point at which to bring Pete in. I just want to share with the audience something which you told me has already happened. He said in one of the science labs in San Francisco, was it, that the neural feedback of response time has been changed. So where our response time might be 250th of a second, we are. What was it? I've suddenly lost the exact figure and I don't want to get it wrong. That ours is normally the quarter of a second, but you have now, or this lab has managed to turn around the reaction time to 250th of a second. And that's how fast the reaction time by changing the neural loop. And you're also sharing that potentially then it could be that if there's a Antarctic fish that can withstand extreme cold, you could be gene splicing that particular gene into humans, so then they could withstand cold as well, and that's where the science could head to. So having laid that parameter, Pete, let me bring you in. You've been a Navy SEAL. You have done the most astounding human sort of performances in high-stress settings. Would you agree with some of what Dan is saying? What is your idea of extending human performance? What's the best way to do it? And why would you not take the route of enhancing with drugs or with engineering the way, say, Dan is talking about?
No, I think that's a good question. And I think there's a situational reality to it, right? So again, like if I'm going into the battlefield and I can get some of these benefits and it's going to work and it won't fail on me in the battlefield, then there's really good reason to possibly do this type of enhancement. But in some environments, that's just not capable. For like the Olympic teams, the elite athletes that are doing Olympics, there is no doping, there is no ability. They can't even put a saline IV in when they have the flu because they'll be suspended or they may get kicked out of competition. So in those instances, I'm looking at really how do you hit superhumanity, or this idea of being more than what they are, more capable with what they have. So I think that's the trade-off that we're looking at is, can you enhance or can't you? And so if you don't have the ability, then there's a basic philosophy I think that's served me throughout my entire life. It's from when I was a kid and had to go through the SEAL teams, and since I've been out, it's really, I look at 3 pillars that create human performance, and the first idea is exposure. We have to expose ourselves to uncomfortable environments, uncomfortable things, mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally. Like we have to test ourselves, test our ceiling. And if we can do that in different environments and in different ways, then those are transferable. And it extends our reference point. It raises our ability to understand how far we can go. The biggest thing that holds us back is our mind. Again, Dan mentioned fear. Dan mentioned holding your breath. Most of those things are regulated by how we think and how we react. So exposure helps us change that line of where we're hitting a ceiling. Then there's this idea of acceptance, which is critical, because once you have a goal, once you have a dream and a desire, and you fully encapsulated that, it becomes the most important thing. Then you'll do anything it takes to get there. The good stuff, the fun stuff, like going and hitting a half pipe and doing a trick, which you love, but you also do the workouts. You'll do the video studies. You'll do all the right nutrition. You'll do all the right things, get the right sleep instead of going out and partying, because you'll accept what it takes to get there. I mean, that's the basis of mental toughness right there, is just acceptance across the board. And the last kind of pillar is this idea of resilience, of when you face problems. Again, it's a mental game. When you hit roadblocks, how do you learn from it, adapt, change, and come back better the next time? whether it's an injury, whether it's some kind of fear-based issue. Like, how do you manage that mentally to come past that?
I'm going to come back to what you just said, Pete, but I wanted Dan to come in on that. Dan, what's the philosophical thinking on this? I think Pete said something very profound, which is that you also shape your psyche to manage adversity, you know? Whereas if we are going to start enhancing and engineering ourselves, what's your understanding? Will the psyche shift along with it? Or will our deltas of discomfort become really tiny, you know? And every time you face adversity, you're going to like want to reach for something external to make yourself capable of coping with that adversity, or ambition, you know, why just adversity?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult question, but I think that, you know, when we think about a human, an individual who wants to achieve something, to overcome the environment, to do something that's very unique, will come up against challenges in the environment, but they'll also come up with challenges within themselves. And when we reach, so you could say, like, let's start with one particular challenge. We might, you know, we need to be able to run at a particular speed. A challenge that we might initially face is we need to develop a certain amount of muscle mass to do that. We need to develop a certain amount of force output to do that. And most individuals will begin that process of training and preparation, build that muscle mass, and then over time they'll hit a limit, a ceiling, in which the body, the genetic code that that individual possesses, can no longer progress any further. And so then that's the point at which they then have a choice, which is, could they use a biochemical enhancement at that point in time to then push through that? And once you enable someone to push through that with a chemical, then you put a stress on the body with that chemical. And then the person has to then adapt to that. So you could give them an androgenic, an anabolic steroid, for example, and they take that and they're able to push through and they build more muscle mass, they get less neural inhibition, and suddenly they can move faster. The psychological part of it has to be there, though, in my experience. You could have all of the physical capacities that meet the environment. You could have all of the physical attributes that allow you to run a sub 10 on 100 meters, but unless the mind is there in the right place, then you're not able to access those physical characteristics.
So,
and at that point, we then need to probably start to think about biochemical enhancements that alter the mind, or we start to think about different ways of exposing that individual, as Pete described.
right. So, Dan, you know, Pete, he said something about the body having to catch up. So I wanted to ask you that you spoke about the moral or societal framework that in Olympics, for instance, they can't put an injection into them because there's a social rule that you should not augment or, you know, put any drugs into your system. But if there was no social rule, just in terms of a biological framework, would you then do it if there were no social rules around this?
Well, I think, again, also to take a little bit of that counterpoint, is that I lived an entire life inside the SEAL teams, which was extreme, dynamic, very adverse conditions, and it wasn't necessary there. So for me right now in my life and the way and my experiences, I wouldn't need to. And for what I
Sorry,
need to.
guys.
That's right. No, and so, you know, I wouldn't need to, and I wouldn't do it personally. But again, depending on the environment and what you're looking at, maybe it's something that can work and that can fit. I mean, if in the end, if Dan can cut gills into my neck and let me breathe underwater, like, I would love to do that, because then I don't need a scuba tank and I can go down, I can play around with the fish and swim with the whales, and, you know, it'd be amazing. So, like, yes, something like that I would absolutely do right now. But I think it's just really when we're talking about performance, and I think the issue and why inside of the military a lot of times we're careful with these things is because you don't want it to fail at the wrong time. You don't want to push the system with drugs in the wrong way, that when when you're in the middle of the most dynamic moment, when everything instinctive has to happen like right now, and it has to happen, but then you have more that has to happen after and after and after and after to get home, then you can't have something fail. So you have to rely on the basic human system, because that's, again, we're talking superhumanity, and the human system is the most important piece of that, is that has to survive in those extreme environments. And so technology, maybe drugs, it wears off, or it stops working right at the moment it needs to work the most. And that's different than, say, a sport environment. Like, let's say someone's enhanced and you have a beta blocker, and if it stops working at the wrong moment, then they may lose, but they just walk off and everything's fine. In the combat environment, you might be dead, or your best friend might be dead, or your entire mission is blown and multiple people are dead. And so that's where I think we have to just understand why we're doing something, and also rely on the reality that humans have done superhuman things without enhancement for thousands of years. Amazing things. There's people who are regulating temperature in the snow through breathing, right? So the reality is we have so much more capability within us if we learn how to tap into it, and we learn how to get out of our own way mentally most of the time.
You know, it's amazing you've said that, Pete. And Dan, of course, we are still the holdout humans. None of us are enhanced, so he is going to get more claps than you, you know. So until you find something where we pop a pill and all of us are flying around in the auditorium, you're not getting any claps, you know. But Pete, I just wanted to zero in on something you said, which is to not become inoperable. And you had used that word when we were chatting earlier, that even when in combat zones you have a rifle with every kind of automatic augmentation, all of you are trained to still shoot without any of the high tech, because, you know, if you're in an adverse situation, you still need to fall back to the simple idea of being human, you know. So that's something, and with that I wanted to come to you, Dan. In the realm of sports, I think so much of the awe and passion and glory of sports is the endeavor, you know, it's the effort, it's the accident that, you know, how is this person divinely blessed that they have it and we don't? So if you create an environment where all of us could augment, and I know you said that you anyway have to have psychological strength for your body to catch up with the new chemical you've put in yourself, or to have a gill in your neck and become a fish, but wouldn't some of the beauty of sports go away? Wouldn't it just become two chemical companies like fighting it out on the play field, and whoever's chemicals are better and whoever's richer? How do you think about that?
I think about it based on the sport or the activity that the individual is doing. I had this was in sport, and I also have a similar story working with a phenomenal neurosurgeon. And we often spoke, the athlete and the surgeon together and myself, and we spoke about the idea of sleep and how it limits performance. For example, for a 24-hour mountain biker, and then a surgeon who is expected to perform multiple operations repeatedly under significant sleep deprivation. And we spoke about the idea of, I said to them, I said, if you could sleep more, do you think that would help you? And both of them said no. They said they'd rather sleep less and perform better. They'd rather be able to sleep less and get more reps in and experience more. And I thought that was really interesting. And so it was just this very informed decision from them that was, look, do you want help in terms of helping you sleep more, or do you want to sleep less and get more reps in and experience more and train more and condition yourself more? And they opted for that. And so to answer your question, Shoma, is the beauty for those two individuals was being able to do more with their time. And they, you know, they didn't want to sleep. And I think many of us experience that on a human level, is there's so many things to do in our life. There's so many things that we want to achieve. And yes, things like modafinil, armodafinil, ampakines, dopaminergic enhancers. These types of substances like bromantane can essentially allow an individual to stay awake for longer. The cost of this, though, you get maybe more of a beautiful experience, but the cost of this is it still takes a toll on the body. And so we have to think about this very carefully. We have to think about how the recycling of toxins produced in the brain and around the nervous system. And we have to think about particular substances that we need to develop, and then in order to help people who then maybe are taking enhancements to not sleep and experience more, but we have to account for the potential risks involved in that as well. So I think it does come down to the individual and what they want. And if they want more beauty and they want more experience, then what's the cost of that?
Right. So, again, we're just having to wrap everything up too fast. But there are a couple of things I quickly want to ask both of you. One is, Pete, you had a beautiful description of what it means to be human, and in this environment where there is, and we are seeing such a amazing sort of frontier scientists who are coming, who are pushing these boundaries of what it's to be human, and there's an audacity of imagination there, which even when I feel worried about it, I want to celebrate people who have no barriers to thinking, who have no biological barriers, no moral barriers, no social barriers, and that's something to celebrate as well. But you had a different idea and conception of what makes us quintessentially human. So would you share that with the audience?
Well, you're saying what makes us quintessentially human, like you're saying I had a different idea. Is this when we were having our discussion earlier?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, I want to jump in on that sleep deprivation issue, just because, I would say the easy answer is just they need to harden the fuck up. But because you can do a hell of a lot without a lot of sleep. I still do it now. I take people out on trips and I'll go 39 hours, 48 hours without any sleep. I get less sleep, and we run people through that so they can learn how. There's a tenet we use inside inside some of our units, but it's mastering the basics under stress. Is that you have to be under that stress. You have to learn how to work in the worst case scenario, not the best case. Most of us train in the best case, the perfect day, the perfect time, everything's just right, we have the right protein shake, but we don't have that in the worst case. So you have to learn how to master the basics in the real environment you're going to be working in the worst moment of your life. And so those are some of the things that come down to, I think, the essence of what humans are, what humanity is that we are a being that can adapt. We are adaptable, we're extremely resilient, but we also have to stress our system to get there. We have to inoculate ourselves and push ourselves in the right ways for the right reasons to the right place. And so I think that's where.
Yes, and you had said something else which really stuck with me, was the conscious decision making, that when you're faced with something adverse, you step back, you calm your breath, you take control, or just that sort of decision making as human beings was something that stayed with me, But coming back to you, Dan, just to close on these thoughts, and something which Pete said is, that this sort of capacity to find that within yourself. But you had said that in the world that we are living in this accelerated time, that biologically, most of us are feeling that we can't survive the pace of time as it currently is. Could you just weigh in on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that we are with the discovery, the invention and discovery of technology, social media, how fast we're able to communicate with each other. There is, the political landscape of the world. There is so much going on in the world right now. I think many people, it can be such a demanding experience of them, and we're all trying to be creative and innovate and find our own ways of connecting and find a way of having a sense of belonging in what we do. And in order to do that, we need to understand what our natural abilities are. We have to hone our natural abilities, and we have to make it work. And I think that this technologically enhanced world that we live in is going to demand more and more of the human on a daily basis. And I think that some people can really benefit from biochemical enhancements to help them navigate everything that they want to achieve in their life. And we are living longer, but with that also comes we want this quality, we want a high quality of life throughout the lifespan. And I think we're very conscious, becoming more conscious of that, of what we do with our time. And I think, you know, just in a nutshell, to wrap up on that, I think I've been thinking a lot about, well, I would love to have more time to do the things that I love doing. But actually what it is I'd love to have more energy to do the things that I would want to do. And because I could have more time, but I could be exhausted. And many individuals I've worked with feel this way. And so the question is could we biochemically provide people with more energy and more energy throughout the lifespan? And to me, that's something that would be an incredible innovation within humanity.
Wow. Dan, this could go on because there's so many profound issues at stake, Pete, but we are going to have to end it there. I am going to take, you know, to the point that Dan said, we actually had a technology failure last night. Our entire console collapsed. So the team and I have not slept for even 1 second all of last night, but we are on stage and we haven't enhanced, you know. So at this moment, I am in Pete's camp, but I just want to see how, you know, because like I said, these are such profound discussions happening in society. I'd love to take a kind of hands raise on those who are aligned with Pete's way of thinking. Would you please raise your hands? Dan, it's so good you didn't come here. But thank you very much, both of you. Dan, one last question. When so many scientists and billionaires are pushing this way of thinking, you know, one generation back, a mother would have said, just stop wanting so much, you know, align your ambitions with your body. But the question is, will our biological bodies all sort of also get elevated? Will there be a kind of, we should have asked David Reich that in a short time span, can we all genetically change? Would our whole biological infrastructure catch up with being superhuman?
I think in some respects, yes. I think we can. I think there are capacities and abilities that we possess as humans that we are not aware of. And we possess certain proteins in our eyes, for example, that can pick up on the magnetosphere, the polarization of what is happening around us, but there is no conscious perception of that. So maybe there is a near future where we could tap into this. And I think some individuals, like animals, already do tap into these extremes. And I think as we understand the human body more, we're going to be able to tap into more of what makes us human with technology. And to me, that's very exciting. But with that, I think what is required is, to Pete's philosophy, is the ability to, the mind is so important, and to condition ourselves and accept who we are at the same time as we progress. Because that acceptance is where our sense of fulfillment and contentment comes from. And that is very important to what it is to be human.
Thank you, Dan. I'm going to allow you that one overlap with Pete. And also, Aaron D'Souza is counting on the fact that all of us are voyeuristic. And while we are uncomfortable with this discussion, that when they launch enhanced games, all of us are going to be watching it to see where the human body can go to without rules and with enhancement. So we may not want to engineer ourselves right now, but I'm sure we're going to be watching it, which is another uncomfortable thing about us human beings. So thank you very much, Dan and Pete, for this wonderful conversation, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.